Is it possible to transfer human consciousness to a robot, a robotic being? During the meeting with shareholders, Elon Musk revealed a goal that is quite bold: to use Neuralink's technology to capture a snapshot of the brain and install it inside Tesla's Optimus robot by 2040. And while Musk and other billionaires discuss transferring human consciousness into robots, scientists are already able, quote-unquote, to revive frozen brains. And others have even managed to stimulate limb regeneration. And some others are using magnetic waves to alter deep patterns in the human brain. And at the same time, while all this is happening, holograms with artificial intelligence are starting to occupy public spaces. Particle accelerators are now starting to think for themselves. And the very AI data centers are already starting to change the temperature of cities. Let's understand all of this. Hello, impressed men and women. I am Realidade Impressionante, and you are watching Realidade Impressionante. And there's a huge difference between controlling a robot with your brain and transferring an entire human mind into it. That's very different. But in recent months, this boundary has started to appear again at the center of technological debate. After Elon Musk suggested an idea that, at first glance, and on second glance too, is pretty crazy: to use Neuralink's technology to capture, quote-unquote, a full snapshot of the human brain and instantiate it inside Tesla's Optimus robot. The proposal has reignited an age-old question for humanity. Can consciousness really be transferred from one being to another? Or from a being to a machine, for example? And the most interesting part is that this time, the discussion involves neuroscientists, billion-dollar artificial intelligence companies, investors, and even international legal debates. But my friends, there is a huge gap between the futuristic vision and the current technical reality. The human brain has about 86 billion neurons connected through more than 100 trillion synapses. Every memory, emotion, habit, perception, and personality trait emerges precisely from these extremely dynamic connections. Although the idea seems fascinating and truly sparks humanity's fascination, the neuroscience community urges caution. The renowned Brazilian neuroscientist Miguel Nicolelli, for example, publicly criticized Musk's idea, stating that the concept still belongs much more to the field of science fiction than to practical engineering, because current systems are still far from understanding the brain in enough detail for something that resembles a complete emulation of the human mind. Today, Neuralink's implants operate with about 1,000 neural recording channels. And yes, this is already extremely impressive for medical applications, of course. People are able to move cursors, control prosthetics, control robots, and even edit using only brain signals connected to the technology. But, as I already mentioned, there is a huge difference between interpreting specific motor commands and capturing consciousness, memory, autobiography, subjective identity, and the complete emotional experience of being human. It's kind of like trying to reconstruct the entire ocean by observing just a few drops of water. And even from a computational point of view, the challenges are enormous. A complete brain simulation would require massive computational capabilities, probably at the hexaflop scale, as well as extremely detailed biological models that science simply doesn't have yet. Despite the physical and biological challenges, the financial market is betting heavily on this fusion. Data from Prudence Research shows that the brain-computer interface sector was valued at nearly $3 billion, with double-digit growth projected through 2035. All of this is driven not only by the pursuit of so-called digital intelligence, but also by real applications in medicine, motor rehabilitation, and neural communication. At the same time, companies are investing billions in humanoid robotics, hoping to turn these machines into physical platforms for advanced artificial intelligence. This is where the discussion turns more philosophical than technological, because even if someday it becomes truly possible to perfectly copy all the information from the human brain, would that really be you? Right there in that robot? Philosophers like Susan Algumas argue that a perfect digital copy might not represent the continuity of the original consciousness. It would just be another entity with the same memories and initial behaviors, but subjectively separate from the biological individual. In other words, mind uploading might not be immortality. Maybe it's just reproduction. And it's exactly this kind of dilemma that is starting to worry governments and international organizations. Discussions about neuro rights, brain data protection, and mental integrity are already appearing in debates linked to UNESCO and in legislative proposals in countries like Chile and some European nations. Because for the first time in history, my friend, human thoughts are now starting to become data that can potentially be accessed by digital systems. However, it's worth noting that even though full consciousness transfer is still extremely far off, the technology being developed along the way is already changing medicine, robotics, and the very relationship between brain and machine. Maybe mind uploading will never happen exactly as we imagine. But the simple fact that scientists and companies are trying to turn neural activity into a computer interface already represents one of the most profound changes in human history. And you, my friend, tell me, if science proved that a robot would really inherit your feelings and everything else, would you really upload your mind, your consciousness? While you open the comment section here to help me out, I'm already going to pull up the next article, which is really interesting and has everything to do with what we're talking about, okay? Leave a comment, don't forget. Answer me. All right, let's go. The freezing of brains to reanimate them in the future. It's always been science fiction, hasn't it? The idea shows up in movies about interstellar travel, cryogenics, and future civilizations trying to escape the limits of human biology. But science has just taken another step, a step that's historic in this sense. German researchers announced an impressive breakthrough. Frozen brain tissue was thawed and started showing functional neural activity again. The neurons resumed exchanging electrical signals after the extreme preservation process. The inspiration for this came from nature itself. There is a species known as the Siberian salamander, which is able to survive buried in extremely low temperatures for extremely long periods. To achieve this effect, the animal produces natural antifreeze substances that prevent cell destruction caused by ice. And scientists decided to apply similar principles to brain tissue. Because the big problem with biological freezing has never been just the cold, the real enemy is water. When cells freeze normally, the internal water forms extremely sharp microscopic crystals. These crystals break delicate cell membranes, destroy neural connections, and turn complex biological structures into non-viable tissue. In other words, it dies right there. So researchers turned to a technique called vitrification. Instead of allowing water to form traditional ice crystals, the tissue is cooled extremely quickly, using liquid nitrogen to temperatures close to minus 196 degrees Celsius. Under these conditions, the water doesn't crystallize in the usual way. It enters an amorphous state, almost like glass. This changes the biological outcome as the brain's microscopic structure stays more preserved during freezing. Tests used rat hippocampus samples, a region strongly linked to memory. The tissue remained stored at extremely low temperatures before being carefully thawed in heated solutions. And the results surprised the researchers themselves. The cells maintained functional metabolic activity. The mitochondria continued to operate properly, and perhaps most importantly, the neural connections preserved signals related to brain plasticity. It's the brain's fundamental ability to strengthen connections and form memories. In other words, my friends, it wasn't just passive cell survival. Part of the tissue's electrical functionality remained intact after this thawing, but it's important to exercise some caution at this point. The authors of the study themselves emphasize that this is extremely far from freezing entire people or resurrecting human brains in the future. A rat's brain is tiny compared to the thermal complexity of an entire human brain. Cooling and heating a gigantic organ evenly without causing damage remains a sufficiently monumental challenge. Even so, the moment we manage to partially interrupt biological processes without completely destroying neural function, we inevitably begin to touch on an ancient question of humanity. Is the human brain just extremely organized matter? Or is there something more inside? Something that can't simply be preserved by ice? You answer that question, okay? I'll be waiting here in the comments section. Now, here's another one. How far can the human body be reconstructed? I'll answer that in the next segment. Stay tuned. While it's not possible to revive an entire frozen brain yet, how about regenerating whole limbs? Until recently, this seemed limited to creatures in nature. Salamanders, they can rebuild their legs, tissues, nerves, and even parts of their heart, as if their own body simply knew how to restart its own biology. But mammals work differently. When we suffer a serious injury, the body prioritizes quick healing by forming fibrous tissue instead of rebuilding the original structure. But now, scientists at Texas University claim to have taken an important step to change all that. The researchers have developed an experimental serum that is capable of stimulating mammals to activate regenerative mechanisms that normally remain switched off. According to the scientists, the ability to regenerate has not completely disappeared from mammals. It has just become obscured over time. In the experiments conducted with the mice, the researchers tried to artificially reproduce the biological process known as epimorphic regeneration. And this is exactly the mechanism used by salamanders to recreate lost limbs. It works more or less like this, okay? I'll give a simple explanation. After an amputation, the cells near the injury stop forming conventional scars and begin to return to a more primitive and flexible state. These cells then form a structure called a blastema. It's a kind of biological platform, a temporary structure that serves as a base to rebuild bones, ligaments, joints, and other tissues. And the big challenge has always been to induce this behavior in mammals. So the team created a serum that is able to send specific biochemical signals to the local cells, guiding them first to avoid excessive scarring, and then to start regenerative processes. And this is one of the most revolutionary parts of the research. Because unlike many experimental regenerative therapies, this approach does not rely on the introduction of stem cells. The process uses the animal's own cells that are already present in the body. In practice, scientists begin to treat regeneration not as artificial replacement, but as internal biological reprogramming. Of course, we are still a long, long way from regenerating complete human arms or creating scenes worthy of science fiction. The researchers themselves acknowledge the current limitations of the technique, but the potential impact is enormous. In the short term, such technologies can help with tissue regeneration after serious accidents, burns, nerve injuries, or complex surgeries. And in the future, they might completely change our understanding of aging, amputations, and biological recovery. And as scientists begin to reprogram tissues and regenerate body parts, they also start trying to directly modify invisible patterns inside our brain. This one is interesting. Let's check it out. Let's go. Let's continue now. Some addictions, like smoking, may be among the toughest battles the human brain can face. And this happens because nicotine addiction is not just a habit. It deeply alters the neural systems related to reward, desire, and self-control. Now imagine trying to rebalance these circuits using bursts of magnetic waves fired directly into the brain of someone who needs it. Researchers at the University of South Carolina claim that a technique called repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, known as RTMS, can help smokers drastically reduce their cigarette consumption. And that's without surgery, without implants, and without invasive medications. The method uses extremely precise magnetic pulses. The idea is to modulate specific regions of the brain associated with addiction. And perhaps the most interesting thing of all is that this technology had already been studied for other neurological conditions, including depression, chronic pain, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Now scientists are beginning to investigate something even bigger: whether the human brain can be, quote-unquote, magnetically recalibrated to fight chemical dependencies. Researcher Xingxingbao Li says addiction causes an internal brain imbalance. Regions linked to reward and desire become overactive, while the areas responsible for decision-making and also self-control gradually weaken. So the MRTR proposal is relatively simple in theory, of course: to magnetically stimulate the regions responsible for rational control in order to restore part of this neural balance. And this reveals something important about the future of neuroscience. For a long time, we have treated addictions almost exclusively as behavioral or psychological issues. And now we are starting to see them also as physical patterns of neural activity, potentially modifiable by technology. And speaking of seeing, focus on this next story here, okay? And while we can't transfer our minds to a robot yet, how about having your own hologram out there? At LaGuardia Airport's Terminal B, passengers are now greeted by Bridget, a hyper-realistic hologram powered by artificial intelligence, who is able to have real-time conversations with visitors, answer questions, and provide detailed directions inside the terminal. The most interesting thing is that Bridget doesn't exactly look like a traditional customer service kiosk. She has a human-sized physical presence, keeps conversations natural, and uses updated airport maps to guide passengers to gates, baggage claim areas, and VIP lounges, almost like a digital receptionist. The system was created through a partnership between Proto and Holomedia, combining holography with conversational artificial intelligence. But this story reveals something much bigger than just a futuristic airport curiosity. Why are airports starting to become real laboratories for the interaction between humans and physics? There's a practical reason for this. Airport environments are extremely complex. They're multilingual and, in many cases, quite stressful. Thousands of people are constantly moving around in huge spaces, trying to find specific information while dealing with delays and the pressure of time passing. So, intelligent digital systems start to look like an extremely efficient operational solution. But different countries seem to be following completely different paths to solve this problem. In the United States, airports like LaGuardia and Miami International Airport are investing in holographic assistants that look almost human. Miami Airport, in fact, has already implemented systems capable of conversing in dozens of languages and integrating in-person service with WhatsApp and digital chatbots. In other words, the passenger starts a conversation at home and continues the same conversation in front of a hologram upon arriving at the airport. It's a fact that airports function as small snapshots of the future. They anticipate technologies, social behavior, and control systems even before they spread to the broader urban landscape. So maybe these holograms aren't just futuristic attendants. Maybe they're the first signs of how artificial intelligence will start to occupy public physical spaces, in our daily lives. But what about when AI is installed in a particle collider? Let's see what happens. Scientists are working on what could become the world's first particle collider, designed with artificial intelligence natively integrated into the infrastructure itself. The project is called the Electron-Ion Collider, or simply EIC. And when it officially goes into operation, probably in the mid-2030s, it is expected to process about 500,000 particle collisions per second. The most impressive thing, however, is the fact that humans simply can't manually find something so complex in real time. Inside the accelerator, particles will circulate in opposite directions in a ring almost 4 kilometers long at speeds close to the speed of light. Keeping all of this stable requires monitoring tens of thousands of parameters simultaneously. Beam intensity, magnetic alignment, vibration, temperature, synchronization, and the behavior of these particles. In other words, it's too much information for even entire teams of specialists to continuously keep track of. So the researchers decided to try something different. Instead of just operating the accelerator with human assistance, the system was designed to learn on its own. Machine learning algorithms will continuously observe the behavior of the beams and automatically adjust the controls to maintain operational stability. Based on the test, the AI systems will now be responsible for separating the signal from noise in real time, reconstructing physical events from the traces left by the particles inside the detector. In practice, the machine not only conducts the experiments, it also helps interpret the universe itself as the data emerges. But all this artificial intelligence comes with a huge physical cost, because behind these machines that are starting to, quote-unquote, think for themselves, there's an infrastructure that's consuming energy on an ever-increasing scale. And it's heating some things up, huh? Let's take a look. There's an invisible consequence of artificial intelligence that few people are noticing. While we're discussing algorithms, robots, and supercomputers, the physical infrastructure that supports this whole revolution is literally starting to change the temperature of cities. Researchers at Arizona State University have discovered something concerning. Data centers are raising the temperature of entire neighborhoods around Phoenix in the United States. In some areas, the recorded increase reached nearly 2 degrees Celsius. It might seem like a small amount at first, right? But in regions that already deal with extreme heat, that difference changes a lot. The researchers decided to directly measure the thermal impact of the data centers in real time. And for that, they installed high-precision sensors in vehicles and traveled through areas near large facilities between June and October 2025. And the results showed a very clear pattern. The areas near the facilities showed a constant increase in temperature, especially within a radius of approximately 500 meters. The air released by the cooling systems can be many degrees above ambient temperature, forming invisible heat plumes around these facilities. The capacity of American data centers is expected to more than double by 2030, driven mainly by the race for artificial intelligence. This means more servers, more energy consumption, and potentially more urban thermal impact. If you like this episode, you know what to do, right? Leave your like, check your subscription, okay? I always say this here, the platform might accidentally remove it. Take a look and see if you're still subscribed. Thank you for staying with me until now. Click on one of the 2 suggestions on your screen and I'll see you in the next one. Just click. You'll see me there soon, okay? Bye-bye and see you in a bit. Thanks.